Well, good afternoon and welcome to our Raising Your Dairy Best Heifer webinar series. This is put on by our Iowa State University Extension and Outreach Dairy team. My name is Jennifer Bentley. I'm a dairy field specialist housed in Northeast Iowa. And today we're going to be talking about managing heifer inventory with Greg Pallas and Fred Hall. And so just as we get started here, this is part of our Dairy Heifer webinar series. And you can see we still have some upcoming ones coming up in July. So our next one will be coming up July 22nd, talking about heifer health, and July 30th, we're going to be talking about heifer reproduction. And so those are going to round out July, and then we'll be finishing up our series here in August. So these are recorded and put out onto our website and our YouTube channel. So following the recording of this today, we'll get it posted on our YouTube channel and send that link out to people. If you aren't able to watch it live, you can go back and review it as well. So with that, I'll go ahead and get started today with managing heifer inventory. And I'm happy to have with us here Fred Hall and Greg Pallas. And Fred Hall is going to kick it off here today, talking about heifer market outlook or heifer inventory here. So Fred Hall is our Northwest Iowa dairy field specialist with Iowa State University Extension and Outreach. Hall joined Iowa State in January 2017 as our dairy specialist in Northwest Iowa. And prior to that, he served as the Chickasaw County Extension Director for Iowa State University and also served several counties in the Texas Extension system prior to that. His fields of expertise include dairy production with emphasis on milk marketing and risk management. He's also involved with the Four-State Dairy Nutrition and Management Conference Planning Committee, and he's the co-chairman for the I-29 MU University Dairy Extension Consortium. As well as we have Greg Pallas. He's the manager of DRMS in Ames, and DRMS is the largest dairy records processing center in the U.S. with 9,000 DHI producers and nearly 2 million cows. Greg has been with DRMS for 42 years and enjoys working with dairy producers to gain knowledge on tools that will help them manage their herds. And today is going to be talking about the Heifer Hub, which is within the DRMS software here. So with that, Fred, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and let you take it away with the heifer market outlook.
Thank you very much, Jen. Today, I'm going to address the heifer market. With the cost of raising a heifer a major part of the cost of producing milk, the heifer market is more than just a benchmark. It's a management factor in raising, selling, or buying replacements. And we're going to look at some of the things that I think are important right now. First in the topics is what's going on with the milking herd. The question of, do we have enough heifers, and what are the heifers worth? Before that, I'm going to talk just a little about the high path and what it's doing to the heifer market. As we look at the milk production, we are seeing a fairly small decline that we can credit to the heifer market. And most of that is because it's a small percentage of the herd. Quirky, it's a larger percentage of higher producing herds. And yet we can't accredit a lot of the production change nationwide to the high path. Will that affect in the future? We'll talk about that a little bit later. But if you think about it, we are going to have to save some cows that are coming back through that illness and probably aren't milking quite the way we wanted them to. So that question will have to be answered in the future. Three things generally attribute to formulating the price of heifers. The price of milk. Obviously, as milk's more expensive, the price of heifers will increase. Right now, we're looking at the price of milk. Class 3 milk is moving upward through at least the last part of the fourth quarter estimates. At that point, we may see kind of a reversal or a softening of the milk price. So I would say prices will hold pretty stable. The second thing that affects the price is the availability of heifers. And if you've been in the market at all, you know that we're breeding a lot of dairy cows to beef bulls. So that opportunity is being put into the beef market. And yet we are also using a lot of sex semen. So we are getting better heifers. And yet we're short of heifers because we have been keeping some cows that we probably should have culled. We're keeping them in the production string because we can't get heifers to replace them. And finally, the inclination of producers to rebuild or expand herds is always dependent upon feed cost and margins. This year, so far, we've seen some pretty good alfalfa in first cutting, and we've had 2 fields in our area that have been cut for second cutting. Dealt with some rain issues on those, but at least there's some volume. So it's important for us to understand that we do have the feed for these. And as you look at what the DMC is saying for margins, we're at $10.52. So that's a pretty good margin compared to what we've seen in the past. We're going to talk just a little bit about the USDA semi-annual estimate of animal inventories. Indicates the number of dairy cows to start 2024 are the lowest in 4 years. And we expect that number to still be constrained with our mid-year reports. With lower cow numbers and increased crossbreeding to beef size, the number of dairy replacement heifers to start the year was the lowest in 2 decades. And even though we're seeing some constraints on the purchasing of beef semen for dairies, it's fairly small, and I suspect we won't see much of a change in that in at least the next 6 months or so. On this slide, if you look and see from 21 to 24, the heifers expected to calve per 100 cows has been steadily heading down. And that tells us that we have kind of a thin margin as we bring replacements into the herds. Because of where I live along the I-29 corridor, we use Pipestone, Minnesota as our traditional marketplace. Here you can see the May 20th sale, top supreme heifers from 33 to 33.50. Our medium heifers at 32 to 33. Let's compare that to a year ago. A year ago, the average was $18.50. If we look at the entire spectrum, recent sale average was $2,500. So a significant increase. I included the crossbreed calves that went through the market on that day from 800 to 850. And yet, if you look at the sale previous to that, they had several tops over 1,100. So those genetics, those crossbred animals, have a significant contribution to dairy margins and will probably continue to be a significant number of animals bred to beef. The USDA National Dairy Comprehensive Report, if you look at this, I've compared 2 years. The third trimester bred dairy heifers averaged over $2,000 nationwide, being an increase of over 40% compared to 2023. The national auction reports bear out a similar trend, with 2 markets breaking into the 3,000 territory. Obviously, Pipestone was one of them, and the sale out in Pennsylvania was the other one. Similarly, USDA data suggests Holstein heifer calf values up more than 150% from $180 per head last year to over $465 a head today. And of course, nationwide beef cross calves continue to fetch tremendous dollars. If you look at that, a lot of them over $1,000 a head. Now, if we look at the total picture, the price of heifers is just one part of keeping your dairy herd consistent. In the first quarter of this year, nearly 750,000 dairy cows were sent to slaughter, down more than 120,000 from a year ago, from the January to March a year ago. More recently, during the week that ended on May 4th, only 48,900 dairy cows were sent to slaughter. Now that number is significant. Culling is normally lower during the spring flush, but this was the first time in nearly 8 years that slaughter dropped below 50,000 head in a non-holiday week. So think about the impact that is telling us on the dairy herds. We're keeping a lot of cows that probably on the cull list for various reasons. And I don't think high path is playing a significant influence on that number. The other part is we get a good handle on these heifers expected to calve. If you look at through about 2015, it was on a pretty stable increase. And after that, it's made a significant decline. The last 2 years, obviously, were really marked decline in heifers expected to calves. Dairy heifer inventories have declined for 6 straight years, which tells us we have got into a management process where we are really thin as far as any extra heifers that we are producing. Now, in summary, a couple of things I think are really important that we have to consider. Let's look at the long-term goals of your herd when using beef and sex semen. Obviously, profitability. If you can get $800 or better per head, that really influences the bottom line. But you have to remember that if you're using sex semen and producing these heifers out of your top cows, the idea that you can produce a few more makes perfect sense. If you've kept cull cows that should have maybe loaded on the pot, it's certainly something to consider to have more heifers in the pool. The other thing that I think we really have to focus on is to be health diligent on deciding what heifers to cull. As a purebred breeder, that calf out of my best cow, it is really tough to put her into the cull pen. But the fact is, if we've treated her a couple of times for pneumonia, or she's had some foot health issues, she's never going to produce to the genetic potential she has. And it makes a lot of sense to have her in the cull pen when you consider the health diligence. This is probably the right time to make a few more dairy heifers. In my career, this is the first time we actually can sell dairy heifers consistently at a profit. We often could cover the cost of production, but at this point, you can probably raise heifers and make a profit on it. And in this new paradigm, we need to start reconsidering pricing heifers on the farm according to the market. It was interesting. I had a phone call from a dairyman. I'm pretty familiar with this herd. He uses pretty solid AI bulls, has a solid genetic herd. And his question was, I probably have 6, 7 extra heifers. Can I ask $2,000 for them? Well, first thing I did was say, let's pull up Pipestone and see what they're worth. And I think as a dairyman with a solid breeding program, it's probably not unreasonable to price those replacement heifers at that $3,500 level, at least to get the conversation started. If you're going to take a discount price on them, you probably would be better off culling a few of the cows that really aren't making you money and going ahead and bringing those heifers into your herd. So,
but thanks, Fred, for your presentation. I think that's a good lead into a software program that can help us manage our inventory as we take a look at our breeding strategies and making those culling decisions. And so, Greg, I invite you to start your presentation on Herd HQ.
Thank you, Jan. And exactly, Fred really laid into our Herd HQ products. So our Herd HQ is a series of products on our website that are available to those producers that process DHI records through DRMS. There's right now, I think there's 7 different products available under Herd HQ. And the one that I'm going to talk about today is the Heifer Hub. So here are the Herd HQ products that you see. We have Cow Compass, Dairy Depot, Herd Highlight, Milk Metrics, Heifer Hub, Keeper Beef, Decisive Dry, and Hot Sheet Pro. So as I mentioned, it's a web-based decision supporting tool. It works with any internet browsers. And those, it can use either your last test day information, or if you do happen to use Dart, you can send your backups to us through Dart Sync, and then it'll use current data. So our product Heifer Hub is used to project future replacement heifer inventory using your past breeding and culling performance information. It will also compute potential income from any surplus animals, given whatever you would indicate is the market prices and your semen usage and costs. And it's very flexible for producers and consultants to use. So there are several things that are used to determine your breeding decisions and planning for future replacements. So things that we need to know is, what is your involuntary culling rates? What are your voluntary culling rates, or in regards to selling heifers? And if you are planning any expansion. So the number of replacements that you're going to be generating depends upon the animals bred this month or week to the different semen types. What is your conception rate? What is your pregnancy loss, your stillbirth, your heifer loss? And what age are you calving out your first calf heifers? A lot of farms don't really know what the pregnancy losses are, or stillbirth, or heifer losses are. But if you're processing your records through DRMS and on DHA, we can pull that information up and get that information to you. So as I mentioned, Heifer Hub is our new online tool to predict future replacements. So we can simulate different strategies to ensure you have enough replacements are available. We also want to maximize the revenues from selling beef and dairy process. And we can also measure the impact of different management changes. So I mentioned we use your DRMS herd information, and we've tried to provide some actual numbers based upon your farm performance. So this is the initial input. screen. So what we will pull in is information on the left side. So the number of cows that are in your herd, what is your culling rate, your involuntary as well as your voluntary culling rate, your heifer loss, what age are you breeding or you're calving your heifers out, your stillbirths, pregnancy losses for the cows, pregnancy losses for the heifers, your conception rate for the cows and the heifers, as well as your semen usage. What percent you're bringing to sex semen or conventional or beef for the cows as well as the heifers. And the number of expected heifers per unit of sex semen, what you're currently been doing, as well as conventional semen. So the information that you have to manually put in is whether the information you're recording is either a monthly or a weekly input and the output that you're wanting, the number of cows that you plan on breeding for that time frame, the number of heifers, to do some of the economic returns, the replacement heifer net revenue minus your feed cost. The number we have here is a little outdated compared to what Fred just mentioned recently. The revenue for selling a dairy bull calf, the revenue from the dairy beef cross, and then also what is your semen cost for both sex semen, conventional, and beef semen. So as we mentioned, these are some of the key areas that we're going to pull in that a lot of producers aren't completely aware of, especially in those losses. Okay, so this is what the information looks like. So for starters, we indicate that we're going to breed 200 cows this month. And based upon our past usage of semen, that is going to equate to 26 cows bred to sex semen, 32 conventional, and 144 to beef. We indicated that we were going to breed 50 heifers. And based upon what we've used in the past, 28 will be bred to sex semen, 22 to conventional, and none to beef semen. So the next thing we're going to be doing is we're going to kind of figure out how many dairy replacement breedings we are going to have. So we're going to have 71 dairy replacement breedings, 35 bull calves, and 144 dairy beef crosses. So then we're going to account for our conception rate. So we look at what our conception rate has been for the last year. So that original 71 dairy replacements, it's going to result in 12 pregnancies for dairy replacements out of the cows, 18 from the heifers. And then we're going to get 6 dairy bull calves from the cows, 8 from the heifers, and a total of 46 beef pregnancies. So a big change. So we start out with breeding 250 total, and we're going to end up with these numbers as far as pregnancies. So the next thing we're going to look at is those animals that we breed today are going to calve 9 months down the road. So we bred those animals in November of 23. They're going to calve in August of 24. So now we're going to adjust those numbers for any pregnancy loss and stillbirth rates that we're able to calculate. So now we're going to end up with 11 replacements from the cows and 17 from the heifers for a total of, we're going to do some rounding here. It's going to end up about 27 total replacement calves being born and 13 dairy bull calves being born and 42 dairy beef calves being born in August. So now those cows or that calve in August and those heifers that are born in August, this particular herd has a 21-month calving. So now those are going to be calving in May of 26. So now we're going to adjust that for heifer loss rates. So those 27 replacements that are born in August are going to end up with 21 replacements actually milking in May of 26. So we figure out, based upon our culling rates, we actually need 23 replacements to enter the milking herd at that time frame in order to maintain herd size. So 34 if we also want to include some sales that we've done in the past. So we're going to end up with 2 heifers being short, actually calving, and actually none that are going to be available for any sales. So that was going to make a big change in some of our information that we're going to be looking at. So that is also going to result in $975 from the revenue from the dairy bull calves, and from our dairy beef calves, we're going to have a revenue of $14,700. We indicate that our semen cost is going to be just under $3,300. So our net revenue for selling any replacements, as well as any of the calves, minus our semen costs, is going to be about $12,400. Now, some of the extra information that we can pull in, we can also look at what our breeding history has been. So using the actual breeding data used in Heifer Hub, we know how many cows we have been breeding and heifers we have been breeding over the past few months or weeks, if we want to look at a weekly data. So these are our default semen usage distributions based upon what we've been using on our annual percentages over the time frame. But we've noticed that we are going to be 2 heifers short to maintain just herd size. So then we start thinking of, well, what if I make some changes? What if we happen to lower our involuntary culling rates? Or what if we have higher conception rates or lower pregnancy losses? Or we reduce our stillbirths and calf losses? Some of those are easy to make changes, but in most cases, those will be gradual changes. Some things that we will be able to do is change our breeding philosophy. So for instance, we can try different ratios of dairy versus beef. If we want to maximize breeding of beef and use of dairy sex semen to generate enough replacements. And can I generate enough replacements from breeding my heifers with sex semen? So those are a couple of what ifs questions that we can use and try to play around with. So I'm going to switch to going directly to Heifer Hub on our web. So this is the information that we kind of messed with. So I'm using current information right now. So this is data as of today for this particular herd. As I mentioned, we're using DART sync data. If you're not sending your information up through DART, you can use test day data, or we're going to use DART sync. So you can just give it a report name so you can pull up later on if you have multiple reports or information you want to set up. So then we click on retrieve the data. So it's going to pull in all this information here. As we see right now, we're going with this particular herd has a little less than 1,100 cows. We're going to breed 175 cows in the month of July and 50 heifers. This is our net revenue. And we may want to say, based upon what some of the information we currently have that Fred provided, maybe we want to increase that to $600. We can also indicate that our dairy beef crosses, let's move that up to 650. And then this is our sex semen, conventional semen, and beef semen costs. So here are some information. So we want to say this new data. We'll calculate some data. And now let's view the information. So we're going to run through this again. Just kind of looking at some of the values we mentioned before. We have 175 cows, 50, and we're just using sex semen and beef semen on our cows. So these are the number of breedings for dairy replacements are 54 dairy replacements. And as we mentioned, these are little question marks kind of give you an idea as far as how those adjustments are made. So now we're making those adjustments based upon conception rates. So we're going to end up with 17 dairy replacements from pregnancies from the cows and 18 from the heifers. The breedings that we make this month will end up being born in April 25. We'll have 7 replacements from the cows, 17 from the heifers. So that's with some roundings. And actually, we're going to end up with 22 replacements, calves being born. So we mentioned we make those adjustments based upon pregnancy losses and any stillbirths. So these 22 heifers will be calving in January. So we're going to end up making some adjustments for heifer losses with 18 heifers actually calving in January of 27. In order to maintain herd size, we actually need 19. If we want to keep selling the same number as we had in the past year, we need 29, but basically we're going to be short 1 heifer. So then this is where we can kind of go back to our setup and say, okay, we need to have more heifers. So I know it's easy to say, well, we're going to lose less heifers, or we're going to have decrease our involuntary culling loss. So, but the easiest thing we can do is to actually increase the number of cows we're going to breed as sex semen. So let's say we're going to increase that from 12 to, let's say, 15%. If you notice, when we increased any of the values here, it makes adjustments based upon the beef semen. So let's say we're not going to use any conventional semen. So now we're going to breed 85% to beef. Our sex semen, let's increase that to 75% for our heifers. And let's change our conventional to 15%. So now we're just going to use 10% on beef. So now let's save these values and see what we have. Okay, so now we're going to have enough heifers to maintain our herd size. But notice we don't have any excess heifers to sell. So, and if you feel that you have a market for heifers, you just may want to go back to your setup again. Very easy to do. And just say, okay, we're going to breed 90% of our heifers of sex semen and 10% to conventional. We're not going to use any beef semen at all. And maybe we also want to increase our cows to, let's say, 25%. which changes our beef semen to 75%. We'll save those data. And now let's see what we have. Okay, so now we're going to be having 7 extra heifers, and you can decide whether you may also want to have some extra heifers of your own. Maybe with the extra heifers coming in, you do want to change some of your culling strategies. Well, that's one nice thing that is good about Heifer Hub. It's very flexible. It's very easy to go back and make some changes. So now we see that with those extra heifers, we're going to have sales of $4,200. So that kind of gives us a lot of leeway that we can use in that. We can look at our breeding history and see how many cows we've bred in the last few months. And maybe those numbers that we projected are wrong. But we can kind of also see where we're at. Maybe we've got some seasonality as far as the number of animals we actually breed in July compared to the previous months. The other thing you want to keep in mind is this information over here is on an annual basis. So we may want to look and see what was our conception rate last July. Does it drop down? You know, summer is coming, and a lot of times those conception rates drop during the summer. So you also want to make some adjustments along that line. What are your conception rates? So especially if you're using DART, you can easily go back and see what your conception rates are. So let's say if it did happen to drop to, let's say, 36% for the cows, and maybe on the heifers conception rate, whoops, we changed that to 45%. So those are some adjustments we want to make, and then we'll see how that impacts. Okay, so that it impacts us in that we're going to have, instead of 7 extra heifers, we're only going to have 4 extra heifers. So that's one thing that's really nice about Heifer Hub, is that you can easily make those adjustments and see how it impacts the results. Now, the next thing that another of our Herd HQ products that we have available is Keeper Beef. We won't go into Keeper Beef very extensively, but Keeper Beef is also a breeding tool that kind of gives you an idea as far as which animals you do want to breed to sex semen or conventional semen or beef. It uses a lot of based upon the genetics of the animals, because we're looking at the outcome of the offspring. So that's why a lot of herds will breed their heifers to sex semen. Ideally, that should be your best genetic group of animals compared to your cows. So you're going to use a higher percentage of sex semen on your heifers. And that's what Keeper Beef will do as well. Will give you that impact of breeding animals to conventional sex or beef. It will also give you a keep value of which animals to possibly cull. So if you are using any of our Herd HQ products, one thing that is we are doing for the month of July and August is that we are providing all of our Herd HQ products at no charge for those months. And then in September, we are opening that up for a larger bundle of any of our Herd HQ products that you can use on your herd. So if you are interested in knowing how to sign up for Herd HQ, so first you will go to our website, which is drms.org. You will log in with your herd code and rack number. And then you will click on your herd code again. And then here's where you will see subscriptions. If you aren't already enrolled in our Herd HQ products, your Herd HQ will be seen down here. You will just click on this subscribe. So I'm going to go ahead and just unsubscribe initially. So here we'll click on subscribe. You will enter in your email address. And then indicate which Herd HQ products you are interested in. As I mentioned, all of these are currently available at no charge for the month of July and August. So you'll just click on save, and then those products will be available. You'll see under Herd HQ will be each of those products, and here's the Heifer Hub. So this is one that we've set up previously. And here's some of the outputs that we've used. So as I mentioned, you can do that monthly or weekly. And then here's the output. Very flexible, very easy to use. And like I said, it works real well with our Keeper Beef product as well. Okay, does anybody have any questions on using Heifer Hub or any of the information that I have gone over today?
So you're welcome to put any questions into chat if you have any questions on Heifer Hub here today. And I have my colleagues Fred and Gail and Larry on so they can monitor the chat as well. Do you guys see any questions that came in?
And I do see that Jen did put a flyer on Heifer Hub into the chat. So if you do want to get some documentation on the product, you'll check out the chat and you can pull down that flyer as well.
I do have one question for you, Greg, and as
Sure.
I'm going to ask that, I just would remind people before you log off here to take a few minutes to evaluate our webinar here today. If you wouldn't mind clicking on the go.iastate.edu Heifer inventory to fill out that quick evaluation about our webinar series. That's appreciative for upcoming topics and webinars that we do. But I guess my question, Greg, for the use of the Heifer Hub, so I know when you enter in your breeding month, it gives you that projection. Is there a way within Heifer Hub, or maybe it's just within DRMS, there's another record to do like a projection based on your monthly breedings to give you a yearly output? Does that make sense?
To see how many, if you use the same breedings each month, you mean?
Yeah, yep.
Okay, okay. We haven't done that, but probably your results would still be the same each month.
Mm-hmm.
If you're breeding the same number each month, your projections basically, because this input information would not change.
Yeah.
So if you indicate, yeah, that would be the same output. And then you can indicate that we'll be calving in some, the same number of heifers each month.
Mm-hmm.
So, I understand your question correctly.
Any other questions from the group?
I've got a question for Fred. So, as you take a look at just the cost of raising heifers from one year to the next, and you think about just the variability in those costs and just how does a producer project? So now, years ago we would say don't raise all those heifers, and now they're worth so darn much, and so we want to make sure that we're at least raising enough. But is there any tools out there that people can kind of project a couple of years down the road? Because when you start raising the heifer, you might as well keep raising it, I think. So any tools to project, like we can try to project milk prices and things like that to say, should I be raising these extra heifers for the next couple of years or not?
I think we can use some of the enterprise budgeting work that you've done to do some projections, but this really kind of crosses over again to your milk marketing. If you lock up some milk and where you're going to be 12 months or 16 months down the road, that certainly helps. But the basic knowledge that I'm saying right now is it's a different paradigm, and the idea of we're culling less, so we need less heifers is maybe not in our best interest for most dairies. I think you're going to be able to sell a product in extra heifers, and what Greg just outlined, you'll be able to know pretty close what you're going to have. So my projections would start with knowing what your milk is worth. Does that make sense, Larry?
Yeah, and I just think maybe to just add to the discussion. So now we have like from $1,600 cost or sale price of heifers, now it's up over twice that much, 100% change in that. So yeah, maybe I think sometimes people don't maybe put their death loss projections into it, and they try to run that a little bit too tight. And so yeah, if you do miss it by 2 or 3 heifers or 1 or 2 percentage points, I think you're probably better off to miss it on the high side that I actually ended up with a couple extra than too few because of biosecurity and a lot of the things that could happen as well. So yeah, it's just there's no easy answer, but I thought you might be able to pull a miracle off on that one.
Well, I think you have some really good budgeting tools there that as we went through this heifer program this past year, that producers really need to understand what it costs to grow a heifer. We tend to not always include every expense that we have.
I would agree.
We do have a question coming in for Greg. On the herd data provided by DRMS, the heifer loss percent equals sold over died, non-completion rate, to breeding age. Stillbirths are DOAs, dead on arrival, and pregnancy loss percent would be the girls that we found open at mid-gestation or pre-dry/late gestation pregnancy diagnosis. So is that correct? And we can go over that again. That was a lot all at once. But is that an accurate summary of those variables?
Yes, I believe that. Listen to that real quick. Yes, that would be correct.
Fred, I want to go back to something you just mentioned. You said with heifer prices looking the way they are, that maybe growing some extra heifers is not the worst idea. Does that mean that we should hold on to every single heifer that we produce on farm, or are there still other reasons that we should be looking at culling heifers?
Well, I think the primary thing that I see in the field is we just have to be more health diligent. You get a heifer for whatever reason, she has got 2 vet calls. The statistics tell us she's probably not going to meet her genetic potential. And that's a hard pill. I mean, you've worked with that pen of heifers, that big white heifer is your favorite, even though Doc's been out for 3 times. we just can't continue to do that. And me as a purebred guy, that we're the worst. You know, she's out of that, you know, best cow or that best heifer, and okay, we can't continue. Well, we can if that's our hobby, but from a purely business point of view, we've got to understand they already have strikes against them. Long-winded for a short answer, Gail. I apologize.
Well, that was exactly what I was hoping you were gonna do.
I also want to note that if there are any consultants that are on the call today, a consultant can also get an account with us and then also run a lot of these programs for herds that process through us for their producers.
All right. I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat. As we kind of wrap up here, again, I want to thank Fred and Greg for being on the webinar here today. And as people are logging off, feel free to click on that evaluation link to complete that before you log off here today. And just as a reminder, we will come back on July 22nd talking about heifer health. We'll have our extension dairy veterinarian, Dr. Phil Jardin, covering heifer health. And more specifically, we're going to focus on respiratory health. So it says heifer health, but I think we're going to spend a majority of the time talking about respiratory health there. So hopefully everybody can join us back there on July 22nd. And so have a good rest of your day, and we'll talk to you soon.